Well, joining me now is Michael Bosicue, former spokesperson for the Organisation for Security and Cooperation in Europe and senior fellow at the Atlantic Council. Michael, great to have you with us. After that torturous gridlock in Congress, finally this aid package for Ukraine has been approved. Shipments, due to start in the next few hours. Explain to us what this means, not just in terms of weapons, but psychologically for the country.
Right. Well, it's absolutely a huge development. I've spoken to my Ukrainian contacts from government diplomacy and elsewhere. Everyone is very, very pleased. And the fact, I think it's a bit of a surprise, actually, Anna, that this is coming so quickly, especially those longer range attack missiles with a range of about 300 kilometers that now give the Ukrainians a capability to strike from inside Ukraine to the Kerch Strait Bridge into Crimea and elsewhere. So that is a huge development. But, it needs to be said that this should have come many, many months ago, because in the meantime, the Russians have been able to dig in with trenches, with barriers to Ukrainian forces. They've also been able to position more men there, and they've also been able to stockpile more missiles. One final thought, if I can, on that particular one. I think that delay, which is very costly to Ukraine in terms of human lives and damage to infrastructure, it may prompt some Americans to think, why is it that an unelected conman, Mr. Trump, can block such a big package of aid and, in the process, compromise U.S. security, European security, and Ukrainian security?
Yeah, as you say, it's not just territory that has been lost, but countless lives. Speak to us the damage that has been done as this has stalled in Congress for the last 6 months.
Sure. Yeah, well, to give you a very vivid example, I'm usually based in Odessa, and I've noticed over the past weeks that for incoming Russian missiles and drones, there's a lot less air defense rockets going up to intercept these things. So what that means is big damage to critical infrastructure. One of the key energy providers in Ukraine have lost 100% of their generation capacity. And where I live, one of the two big ports in Odessa was struck by Russian forces just a few days ago. And, it boggles the mind, because people should be considering this infrastructure, the ports of Odessa, as a critical component of the global food supply chain. I can't understand why more Western muscle isn't being deployed there to protect these critical sea lanes, on par almost with what's being deployed, the muscle being deployed to the Red Sea.
Michael, we know this is $61 billion, but is it enough for Ukraine, not just to stay in the war and hold ground, but to actually fight back and reclaim territory?
Well, the reality is that Ukraine needs to fire so much muscle firepower to the Russian side that this is going to be depleted rather quickly, because don't forget, they've been conserving missiles for the past few months. So I think what this means is that the American administration is going to have to find new ways to get money to Ukraine. And it does look like, Hannah, that could include, for example, selling off frozen Russian assets. But it's also giving a push to, for example, in Europe, where there is, we have to admit, some opposition to aid to Ukraine. For example, releasing the millions and millions of interest accumulated from frozen Russian sovereign assets in Belgian bank accounts and giving that to Ukraine. So a lot of thinking going on how, amidst this opposition, if we want to call it that, in the various democracies, that, elected officials can get more money to Ukraine. Because if they don't, it's going to become a lot more expensive. Mr. Putin will not stop at Ukraine, and if he does attack a NATO country like Poland, that would trigger the need for U.S. and other allied boots on the ground. So the cost could be immense.
Michael, do you envisage a Ukrainian counter-offensive in 2024, or is it more likely to happen the following year?
I think what we're going to see is Ukraine upping their defensive positions along the front line, and also air defense systems. But I think you're also going to see the use of what the U.S. is providing, long-range strike capability to strike inside Ukraine to legitimate military targets, and also, for example, putting out once and for all Putin's pet project, the Kerch Strait Bridge, which transports a lot of military supplies to the front line. But you know, the Russians will use various tactics, including their long-range missiles, to fire at cities like Kharkiv, as far as Lviv in western Ukraine. And then this is also a psychological warfare that the Russians are waging, because it is causing a lot of anxiety in Ukraine, forcing people to make that very, very difficult decision whether to stay or go. And it also hurts business confidence. None of the airports in Ukraine have been open since the start of the war, and that creates huge logistical bottlenecks.
Michael Bosicue, always great to speak to you. Thank you for your perspective.
Thank you for having me.